There's a special kind of hell reserved for men who betray themselves. It's the moment when everything you thought you knew collapses in a single breath. When the person you swore to destroy becomes the only person who ever truly saw you. When the knife you sharpened for years suddenly feels too heavy to lift. Vincent Romano discovered this the night he looked into Sofia Delano's eyes and realized he'd already lost a war he didn't know he was fighting. He came to destroy her father. He stayed because of her. And when the truth came out, it didn't just end a mission, it ended the only version of himself he'd ever been able to live with. For 3 years, Vincent served in the home of Marcus Delano, the man who murdered his family. 3 years of pouring wine, folding linens, and smiling through gritted teeth while rage burned in his chest like a furnace. He had one job: get close, gather evidence, and when the moment was right, destroy everything the old man had built. But then he met her, Sofia, the daughter. The one person in that house who wasn't supposed to matter. The one person who looked at him like he was human, not invisible. She didn't know the man serving her dinner was the son of the people her father had killed. She didn't know every conversation they shared was built on a lie. And she certainly didn't know that on the night Vincent finally had everything he needed to bring her father down, she would stand in front of him with tears streaming down her face and whisper the 4 words that shattered him completely. I know who you are. Sometimes the most dangerous weapon isn't a gun. It's a smile from someone who trusts you completely. This is the story of a man who walked into an enemy's house with murder in his heart and walked out with a scar that would never heal. Vincent Romano wasn't always a ghost. There was a time when he had a real name, a real family, a real life. That was before the night Marcus Delano decided his father knew too much. Vincent was 19 years old when it happened. His father, Tony, worked as an accountant for one of Delano's front companies. Quiet guy, kept his head down, did the books, and asked no questions. But Tony Romano made one fatal mistake. He saw something he wasn't supposed to see. Offshore accounts, shell companies, money moving through channels that didn't exist on paper. And when you see that kind of thing in Marcus Delano's world, you don't just quit, you disappear. It was a Tuesday night in October. Vincent was at college 3 hours away when he got the call from his younger sister, Gina. She was screaming. The line went dead before he could understand what she was saying. He drove home faster than he'd ever driven in his life, but he was already too late. When he arrived, the house was surrounded by police tape. His father shot twice in the chest. His mother once in the head. Gina, 14 years old, found in her bedroom. The official report called it a home invasion. Robbery gone wrong. But Vincent knew better. There was no forced entry. Nothing valuable was taken. This wasn't random. This was a message. And the message was clear. Marcus Delano's secrets stayed buried, no matter the cost. Vincent spent the next 2 years in a haze of grief and fury. He dropped out of school, moved between cheap motels and friends' couches, drank too much, slept too little. But beneath the spiral, something cold and calculated was forming. Revenge isn't something you stumble into. It's something you architect. He started small, researching Delano's operations, learning his routines, mapping his properties. The man was untouchable, protected by layers of lawyers, dirty cops, and loyal soldiers who'd known him for decades. You couldn't just walk up and put a bullet in Marcus Delano. You had to get close, closer than anyone suspected. And that's when Vincent had the idea that would consume the next 3 years of his life. Delano's estate employed a rotating staff of housekeepers, cooks, drivers, and groundskeepers. Invisible people, the kind you pass in the hallway and forget a second later. If Vincent could become one of them, he could move through Delano's world unnoticed. He could listen, watch, wait, and when the time was right, he could strike. So he erased himself. Changed his name to Vincent Cross, bleached his background, built a fake work history, learned how to fold a fitted sheet, polish silver, and serve a 5-course meal without making eye contact. He became exactly what they were looking for: competent, quiet, forgettable. And when a position opened up at the Delano estate, Vincent applied. 3 months later, he got the call. He was hired. On his first day, as he stood outside the gates of the mansion where Marcus Delano lived, Vincent made himself a promise. He would not leave until the man who killed his family paid for what he'd done. He would gather every piece of evidence needed to bury Delano legally, or if that failed, he'd do it himself. No hesitation, no mercy, no second chances. He walked through those gates with one purpose. He had no idea that within 6 months, everything he believed about revenge, justice, and himself would be torn apart by a woman he never saw coming. Before we go deeper into Vincent's story, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. And if you're new here, click on the subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. Now, imagine being in Vincent's position. You've lost everything. The people you loved most are gone, and the man responsible is living freely behind mansion walls. Would you have done what he did? Would you have walked into that house knowing it might cost you your life? Keep that question in mind as this story unfolds. Vincent's first day at the Delano estate began at 6 in the morning. He arrived through the service entrance, a narrow door tucked behind a hedge where delivery trucks parked and staff clocked in without ever being seen by the family. The head housekeeper, a stern woman named Mrs. Chen, handed him a uniform, black slacks, white shirt, black vest, and a list of rules so long it could have been a legal contract. No eye contact with family members unless spoken to directly. No questions about their business. No personal phone calls during working hours. And above all, no gossip. Discretion wasn't just expected, it was survival. Vincent nodded, memorized every word, and got to work. The mansion was massive. 12 bedrooms, 9 bathrooms, a library that could fit his childhood home twice over. Marble floors that echoed with every footstep. Floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked manicured gardens, stretching out like a country club. This wasn't just wealth. This was power made visible. And somewhere in this house, Marcus Delano walked freely, completely unaware that the man now polishing his silverware had spent 2 years dreaming of his death. The first week was all about blending in. Vincent kept his head down, worked efficiently, and spoke only when necessary. He learned the layout of the house, noting every entrance, every hallway, every room that stayed locked. He memorized the staff schedules. The cook, Nina, started at 5. The groundskeeper, Luis, worked outside until sunset. Mrs. Chen ran the house like a military operation, and nothing escaped her notice. Vincent made sure she had no reason to notice him. But while his hands folded linens and arranged flowers, his mind was mapping. He noted which rooms Marcus spent the most time in. The office on the 2nd floor with the heavy oak door. The private study where he made phone calls with the door closed. The dining room where he entertained guests Vincent recognized from news reports, politicians, businessmen, men whose smiles were as hollow as their handshakes. Vincent watched everything. He listened to fragments of conversations. He studied the way Marcus moved through the house, the way people deferred to him, the way his voice could shift from warmth to ice in a single sentence. This was a man who controlled everything around him, a man who believed he was untouchable, and Vincent was going to prove him wrong. But infiltration wasn't just about observation, it was about performance. Every morning, Vincent put on a mask. He smiled when Marcus passed him in the hallway. He poured coffee without his hands shaking. He responded to orders with a polite, "Yes, sir," even though the words tasted like ash in his mouth. There were moments when the rage threatened to break through. Moments when Marcus would laugh at something on the news, or compliment the meal, or thank Vincent for his service. And Vincent had to swallow the urge to grab the nearest object and end it right there. But revenge wasn't about impulse. It was about patience. It was about waiting for the perfect moment when he could take everything from Marcus the way Marcus had taken everything from him. So Vincent played his role. He became invisible, reliable, trustworthy. Just another face in the background of a life built on blood and lies. And every night, when he returned to the small room he rented in the city, he wrote down everything he'd seen, names, conversations, patterns, evidence. He was building a case, brick by brick, that would either send Marcus Delano to prison for the rest of his life or give Vincent the justification to do what the law couldn't. 3 weeks in, Vincent thought he had it all figured out. He knew the routines. He knew the players. He knew how to move through that house like a shadow. But on a quiet Thursday afternoon, as he was carrying a tray of tea to the second-floor sitting room, everything changed, because that's when he saw her for the first time, Sophia Delano. And nothing about his plan prepared him for what happened next. Vincent had seen photographs of Sophia before, a few grainy images pulled from social media during his research phase. A young woman in her mid-20s, dark hair, reserved smile. Daughter of Marcus Delano. That's all she was supposed to be. A footnote, a complication to avoid. But the woman standing in the hallway that Thursday afternoon wasn't what he expected. She was younger than the photos suggested, maybe 23 or 24, wearing jeans and an oversized sweater that made her look more like a college student than the daughter of a crime boss. Her hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail, and she was carrying a stack of books so tall it looked like it might topple over at any second. She didn't notice him at first. She was too focused on balancing the books while trying to unlock the door to what Vincent later learned was her personal study. One of the books slipped, then another. And before she could stop it, the entire stack crashed to the floor in a cascade of thudding paper and frustrated sighs. Vincent hesitated. His training told him to keep walking. Don't engage. Don't be memorable. But something about the way she stood there, staring at the mess with her shoulders sagging in defeat, made him stop. He set the tea tray on a side table and crouched down to help. "Let me get that," he said quietly. She looked up, startled, and for a brief second their eyes met. Hers were brown, tired, and there was something in them he didn't expect. Kindness. Not the performative politeness people use with staff, but genuine surprise that someone had stopped to help. "You don't have to," she said, already bending down to gather the books herself. "I've got it." "I know," Vincent replied, picking up 3 books at once, "but it'll go faster with 2 people." She paused, then smiled. A small, real smile that didn't belong in this house. "Thank you. I keep telling myself I'll make 2 trips, but I never do." They worked in silence, stacking the books into a more manageable pile. Vincent noticed the titles: Philosophy, Political Theory. A worn copy of The Brothers Karamazov with sticky notes jutting out from every other page. These weren't decorative books. She actually read them. "You're new," she said as they stood up, her arms now cradling a much smaller stack. Vincent nodded. "Started a few weeks ago. What's your name?" The question was casual, but it landed like a trap. He'd prepared for this, practiced it 100 times. But standing there, face to face with her, it felt heavier than it should have. "Vincent," he said. Not Cross, not Romano, just Vincent. She shifted the books to one arm and extended her hand. "Sophia." Her handshake was firm, confident, and when she let go, Vincent realized something that sent a cold wave of unease through him. She'd looked him in the eye. She'd said thank you like she meant it. She'd treated him like a person, and that was going to be a problem. Over the next few days, Vincent tried to put the encounter out of his mind. It didn't mean anything. She was polite, that's all. Probably the kind of person who smiled at everyone and forgot them 5 minutes later. But then it happened again. He was cleaning the library when she walked in, looking for a book on existentialism. She asked his opinion. He gave a non-committal answer. She laughed and said, "You don't have to pretend you haven't read Camus. I saw you looking at the shelf yesterday." He had been. And the fact that she'd noticed made his chest tighten in a way he couldn't explain. Then there was the morning she found him in the kitchen before dawn, making coffee before his shift started. She was in pajamas, barefoot, hair a mess. She didn't apologize for her appearance or act embarrassed. She just poured herself a cup, sat at the counter, and asked him how he was settling in. Not as a formality, as an actual question, Vincent kept his answers short, professional. But inside, something was shifting. He'd spent 2 years imagining everyone in this house as complicit, as extensions of Marcus Delano's empire. But Sophia didn't fit. She wasn't cold. She wasn't cruel. She didn't walk around like she owned the world. If anything, she seemed lonely, and that made her dangerous in a way Vincent hadn't anticipated. He tried to refocus, reminded himself why he was here. His father, shot in his own living room. His mother, collapsed in the hallway. Gina, 14 years old, who never got to finish high school or fall in love or live any kind of life at all. Sophia Delano might be kind. She might be lonely. She might look at him like he mattered. But she was still Marcus Delano's daughter. And when the time came, Vincent couldn't let that stop him. Except every time she smiled at him, every time she said his name, every time she treated him like he was more than just a servant in her father's house, a small voice in the back of his mind whispered the same question. What if she's not the enemy? And that question, more than anything else, terrified him. Living a lie is exhausting in ways most people never understand. It's not just about remembering a fake name or a fabricated past. It's about controlling every micro-expression, every instinctive reaction, every flicker of emotion that might give you away. Vincent had become a master of it. When Marcus Delano walked into a room, Vincent's face remained neutral, even though every muscle in his body wanted to lunge. When he overheard phone conversations about shipments and payoffs, he filed the information away without so much as a raised eyebrow. When he served dinner to men he recognized from FBI wanted posters, he poured wine with steady hands and a blank expression. He was a ghost, a shadow, a perfectly controlled instrument of patience. But the control was starting to crack, and it was because of her. Sophia had a habit of appearing when Vincent least expected it. She'd wander into the kitchen while he was preparing breakfast and steal a piece of fruit, asking him about his day, as if his answer actually mattered. She'd pass him in the hallway and make some offhand comment about the weather or a book she was reading, and he'd find himself responding before he could stop. She didn't treat him like staff. She treated him like a human being, and every interaction chipped away at the wall he'd built between himself and this family. There were moments when Vincent caught himself looking forward to seeing her. Moments when he'd take a slightly longer route through the house, just in case she was in the library. Moments when her laugh, light and unexpected, would cut through the noise of his anger and make him forget, just for a second, why he was there. And those moments scared him more than anything Marcus Delano could do. Because the mission was still happening. Every day, Vincent gathered more evidence. He'd installed a small recording device in Marcus's office during a late-night cleaning shift. He'd photographed documents left carelessly on desks. He'd memorized license plates of visitors and cross-referenced them with known criminal networks. He was building a file that could take down an empire. But at night, when he sat alone in his rented room reviewing the evidence, Sophia's face kept slipping into his mind. The way she'd looked at him when he'd helped her with the books. The way she'd asked his opinion on Dostoevsky like it mattered. The way she said his name, Vincent, with a softness that made it sound like it belonged to someone worth knowing. He tried to remind himself of the truth. She was Marcus Delano's daughter. She lived in a house built with blood money. She benefited from every crime her father committed, whether she knew it or not. But the more time he spent around her, the harder it became to see her as just another piece of the empire. She was becoming something else, something real. And that was the most dangerous thing that could happen. Vincent had spent 2 years preparing for this. He'd sacrificed everything, his education, his identity, his future, for one purpose. He couldn't let it fall apart because of a kind smile and a few conversations about philosophy. But the truth was, it was already falling apart. Because every time Marcus Delano praised him for a job well done, Vincent didn't just feel rage anymore. He felt guilt. Because Sophia trusted him. She talked to him like a friend. And he was lying to her every single day. The weight of it was crushing. There were nights when Vincent would stand in the shower and let the water run until it turned cold, trying to wash away the feeling that he was becoming something he didn't recognize. He'd come here to destroy a monster, but in the process, he was becoming one himself. He was manipulating a woman who'd done nothing wrong. He was living in her home, earning her trust, letting her believe he was someone safe. And when the truth came out, because it would come out, it would destroy her. Vincent knew he should pull back, keep his distance, stop engaging with her beyond what was absolutely necessary. But he couldn't. Because somewhere along the way, Sophia had stopped being Marcus Delano's daughter. She'd become Sophia, a woman who read existentialist philosophy at 2 in the morning. A woman who left thank you notes for the staff even though no one else in the house did. A woman who seemed just as trapped in this mansion as Vincent felt, even if her cage was gilded. And the worst part? He was starting to care what happened to her, which meant he was starting to fail, because caring about Sophia Delano wasn't part of the plan. And if he didn't get control of himself soon, everything he'd sacrificed would be for nothing. Sophia Delano was a prisoner in a mansion. Most people wouldn't see it that way. They'd see the designer clothes in her closet, the expensive car she rarely drove, the credit cards with no limit. They'd see privilege, opportunity, freedom. But Vincent was starting to see the truth. Sophia had been raised in a cage, and the bars were made of expectations she never asked for. Her father loved her that much, was obvious, but Marcus Delano's love came with conditions. She would attend the right schools, associate with the right people, marry someone who benefited the family's interests. She would be protected, provided for, and kept close, always close. Because in Marcus's world, family wasn't just blood, it was leverage, and Sophia was too valuable to let wander. Vincent noticed it in small ways at first. The way Marcus would ask where she was going whenever she left the house. The way his tone would shift from affectionate to cold if she pushed back on his suggestions. The way Sophia had stopped pushing back altogether. She'd learned to navigate her father the way someone navigates a minefield, carefully, quietly, always aware that one wrong step could detonate something ugly. But she wasn't cold. She wasn't broken. She was just surviving. Vincent saw it in the way she'd retreat to her study for hours, losing herself in books that had nothing to do with the life her father wanted for her. He saw it in the way she'd slip out to the garden at dawn, before anyone else was awake, and sit alone with a cup of coffee like she was stealing a few moments of peace before the performance began. And he saw it in the way she talked to him. Sophia noticed the staff in a way no one else in that house did. She remembered names. She asked questions. She thanked people for things that were technically their job but still deserved acknowledgement. And with Vincent, it went deeper. She'd started seeking him out, not in an obvious way, but in the small, quiet moments when no one else was around. She'd find him in the library and ask what he was reading. She'd linger in the kitchen while he prepped meals and talk about whatever was on her mind. Politics, philosophy. The suffocating weight of living a life that didn't feel like hers. She never said it outright, but Vincent could hear it in her voice. She was lonely, deeply, painfully lonely. And for reasons he didn't fully understand, she decided he was safe to talk to. Maybe it was because he didn't treat her like Marcus Delano's daughter. He treated her like Sophia, a person. Not a prize or a liability, just someone trying to figure out who she was in a world that had already decided for her. One afternoon, she told him something that made his chest tighten in a way he couldn't shake. They were in the garden. He was trimming hedges. She was sitting on a stone bench with a book she wasn't really reading. "Do you ever feel like you're living someone else's life?" she asked suddenly. Vincent paused, shears in hand, and glanced at her. She wasn't looking at him. She was staring at the roses, like they held an answer she couldn't find. "Sometimes," he said carefully. She nodded, still not meeting his eyes. "I think about leaving. Not running away, just leaving. Going somewhere no one knows my name. Starting over." She laughed, but it was hollow. "But I can't, because if I did, it would break his heart, and I can't do that to him. No matter how much I want to." Vincent didn't respond. He couldn't, because in that moment, he realized something that made everything infinitely worse. Sophia wasn't just Marcus Delano's daughter. She was his hostage. Not in the literal sense, but emotionally, she was chained to a man who loved her and controlled her in equal measure. And when Vincent's plan finally came to fruition, when Marcus Delano's empire collapsed and the truth about his crimes went public, Sophia would be collateral damage. She'd lose her father, her home, the only life she'd ever known, and it would be because of Vincent, the man she trusted, the man she talked to like a friend, the man who was lying to her every single day. It started with late-night conversations. Sophia had insomnia. Vincent learned this one night when he was working late, finishing a deep clean of the first-floor study. It was past midnight. The house was silent, except for the hum of the refrigerator and the distant sound of wind against the windows. He was putting away cleaning supplies when he heard footsteps on the stairs. Soft, hesitant. He turned and saw her standing in the hallway, wrapped in an oversized cardigan, barefoot, hair loose around her shoulders. "I didn't think anyone else was awake," she said. "I could say the same," Vincent replied. She smiled faintly. "Can't sleep?" "Never could," she admitted. "You?" He should have lied, should have said he was just finishing up and heading out. But instead, he told her the truth. Same. She looked at him for a long moment, and then she did something that changed everything. She sat down on the bottom step and asked, "Do you want some tea?" They ended up in the kitchen. Sophia made chamomile tea while Vincent sat at the counter, watching her move through the space like she'd done this 1,000 times. She didn't talk about her father. She didn't talk about the family business. She talked about books, about philosophy, about the question that had been haunting her lately, whether people were defined by the choices they made or the circumstances they were born into. "I think it's both," Vincent said quietly. "But the choices matter more." She looked at him, really looked at him, and something in her expression shifted. "You're not like the others," she said. "The other staff, I mean. You actually think about things." Vincent's throat tightened. "So do you." "Yeah, but I'm supposed to," she said with a sad smile. "I've got nothing else to do." The conversation stretched into the early hours of the morning. And when Vincent finally left, he realized he'd just made a mistake he couldn't undo. Because he hadn't been performing, he'd been real, and so had she. After that night, it became a pattern. Sophia would find him when the house was quiet. They'd talk about everything and nothing. About the books she was reading, the future she wasn't sure she'd ever have, the weight of being Marcus Delano's daughter. And Vincent found himself opening up in ways he hadn't with anyone since his family died. He told her about losing people he loved. He didn't say how, he didn't say who. But he told her enough that she understood grief. And she didn't try to fix it, she just listened. One night, she asked him why he took this job. Why he was working as a servant when he clearly had more to offer. Vincent had prepared an answer for this, a story about needing money, about keeping his head down. But when he looked at her, sitting across from him with her guard completely down, he couldn't bring himself to lie. "I needed to be close to something," he said. "To understand something I couldn't from the outside." It wasn't the full truth, but it was closer than anything else he'd said. She nodded slowly. "I get that. Sometimes you have to be inside something to see it clearly." And then she said the thing that broke him. "I'm glad you're here, Vincent." He was falling for her. He didn't want to admit it, tried to rationalize it away. Told himself it was just proximity, just loneliness, just the mind playing tricks in the middle of a high-stakes operation. But the truth was undeniable. He was falling for Sophia Delano. And it was the worst thing that could have happened, because every conversation they had, every shared laugh, every moment of quiet understanding was another nail in the coffin of his mission. How could he destroy her father, knowing it would destroy her too? How could he take everything from the man who'd taken everything from him when the cost was the one person who made him feel human again? Vincent started losing sleep, not because of nightmares about his family, though those still came, but because of Sophia, because of the way she looked at him, because of the way she trusted him, because of the way she'd started confiding things she'd never told anyone else. One night, she told him about her mother, how she died when Sophia was 12, how Marcus had never been the same after, how Sophia had spent her entire adolescence trying to fill a hole that couldn't be filled, trying to be enough for a man who was drowning in his own grief and rage. "I think that's why he holds on so tight," she said quietly. "He's terrified of losing me too." And in that moment, Vincent understood something he'd been avoiding. Marcus Delano wasn't just a monster. He was a man who'd lost someone he loved and built an empire to make sure it never happened again. That didn't excuse what he'd done. It didn't bring Vincent's family back, but it made him human. And that made everything so much harder. Because Vincent had spent 2 years hating a monster, but now he was starting to see a man. A flawed, dangerous, unforgivable man. But a man nonetheless. And worse, he was seeing the daughter that man loved more than anything in the world. The daughter Vincent was falling for. The daughter who, in a few weeks, would look at him with those same trusting eyes and realize everything had been a lie. Vincent's burner phone buzzed at 2:47 a.m. on a Tuesday. He was lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying a conversation he'd had with Sophia earlier that evening. She'd told him about a childhood memory, her father teaching her to ride a bike in the driveway of their old house. She'd laughed while telling it, a real unguarded laugh. And Vincent had smiled back, forgetting for a moment that he was supposed to be her enemy. The phone buzzed again. He picked it up. The message was from Raymond Torres, a federal prosecutor Vincent had been feeding information to for the past 18 months. Torres was one of the few people who knew Vincent's real identity and why he was inside the Delano estate. The message was short. "We need to move. Call me." Vincent's stomach dropped. He slipped out of bed, pulled on jeans and a jacket, and stepped outside into the cold night air. He walked 3 blocks before dialing. Torres picked up on the first ring. "We've got a problem," Torres said without preamble. "Delano's moving assets offshore. We've been tracking unusual wire transfers for the past 2 weeks. If he's liquidating, it means he knows something's coming. He doesn't know about me," Vincent said, though his voice lacked conviction. "Maybe not," Torres replied, "but he's spooked. And if he runs, we lose everything. We need to move within the next 2 weeks. 3 at most." Vincent's chest tightened. "That's too soon. It's the only window we have. If he relocates, we'll never touch him. I need everything you've got. Recordings, documents, financials, whatever you've been holding on to, I need it now." Vincent ended the call and stood in the empty street, feeling the weight of 2 years crashing down on him. The plan had always been meticulous. Gather irrefutable evidence, build an airtight case, hand it over to the feds, and watch Marcus Delano spend the rest of his life in prison. Clean, legal, justified. But that plan had been built on the assumption that Vincent would have time to prepare. Time to extract himself cleanly. Time to figure out what the hell he was going to do about Sophia. Now, the clock was ticking, and he wasn't ready. Over the next few days, Vincent moved faster than he ever had. He copied hard drives from Marcus's office. He documented meetings with known criminals. He recorded phone conversations that implicated 6 city officials. The evidence was overwhelming. Racketeering, money laundering, extortion, conspiracy to commit murder. It was enough to bury Marcus Delano for good. But every piece of evidence Vincent gathered felt heavier than the last, because he knew what it meant. When this came out, Sophia's world would collapse. Her father would be arrested. The mansion would be seized. Her name would be dragged through every news outlet in the country, and she'd know that Vincent had been the one to do it. She'd know that every conversation they'd had was built on a lie. Every moment of trust was a betrayal. Every late-night talk in the kitchen was just him gathering ammunition to destroy her family. Vincent tried to tell himself it didn't matter, that justice was more important than one person's feelings, that Marcus Delano deserved everything coming to him. But when he saw Sophia in the hallway the next morning, smiling at him like he was the only person in the house who understood her, the justification crumbled. She didn't know. She had no idea what was about to happen. And Vincent, the man she trusted, was the architect of her destruction. That night, Vincent sat alone in his room with a folder full of evidence that could end Marcus Delano's empire. He stared at it for hours, trying to find a way forward that didn't destroy Sophia in the process. But there wasn't one, because the truth was simple and brutal. If Vincent went through with this, he'd get justice for his family, but he'd lose Sophia forever. And if he walked away, Marcus Delano would keep operating, keep hurting people, keep destroying families the way he destroyed Vincent's. There was no clean choice, no right answer, just two versions of loss, and Vincent had to decide which one he could live with. The deadline was 12 days away, and Vincent still didn't know what he was going to do. It happened on a Thursday night. Vincent was cleaning the second-floor hallway when he heard voices coming from Marcus's office. The door was slightly ajar, unusual, since Marcus always kept it closed during private conversations. Vincent should have kept walking, should have finished his work and left. But something about the tone of the voices made him stop. One of them was Marcus. The other was familiar, but Vincent couldn't place it at first. He moved closer, staying out of sight, and listened. "You're sure it's handled?" the other voice said. Vincent's blood went cold. He recognized it now. Raymond Torres, the federal prosecutor, the man Vincent had been feeding information to for 18 months, the man who was supposed to be building a case against Marcus Delano. "It's handled?" Marcus replied, his voice calm. "The shipment's been rerouted, the paperwork's clean, and the witness won't be a problem anymore." "Good," Torres said. "Because if this blows back on me, we both go down." Vincent's mind struggled to process what he was hearing. Torres wasn't investigating Marcus. He was working with him. Every piece of evidence Vincent had handed over, every recording, every document, every detail he'd risked his life to gather had gone straight to Marcus Delano. Vincent felt the floor tilt beneath him. He pressed his back against the wall, trying to breathe, trying to think. Torres had played him. For 18 months, Vincent had believed he was working toward justice. But he'd been feeding intelligence to the enemy. Marcus knew everything. He knew about the recordings. He knew about the financial documents. He probably knew Vincent's real name. And if Marcus knew, then why was Vincent still alive? The answer hit him like a freight train. Because Marcus was watching. Waiting, letting Vincent think he was in control while Marcus planned his next move. And the next move would be permanent. Vincent's hands were shaking. He needed to get out. Needed to disappear before Marcus decided he was too much of a liability. But then he heard something that stopped him cold. "What about your daughter?" Torres asked. There was a pause. Then Marcus spoke, and his voice was different. Quieter. Almost vulnerable. "Sophia doesn't know anything. And she never will. That's the whole point. She's getting close to that new guy," Torres said. "Vincent, right? The one who works here. I've seen the way she looks at him." Marcus let out a harsh laugh. "She's lonely. She'll get over it. And if he becomes a problem, I'll deal with him the same way I've dealt with every other problem." Vincent's chest constricted. Marcus didn't know who he was. Not yet. But he was watching. And the moment Vincent became a threat not to Marcus's empire, but to Sophia, he'd be eliminated. Just like Vincent's father. Just like everyone else who'd gotten too close to Marcus Delano's world. Vincent pulled himself away from the door and walked down the hallway on autopilot. His mind was racing, fragments of thought colliding too fast to process. Torres was dirty. The case was dead. Marcus didn't know Vincent's identity, but he was watching him because of Sophia. And if Vincent kept getting closer to her, Marcus would kill him. Not because of revenge, not because of evidence, but because Marcus Delano protected what was his, and Sophia was his. Vincent made it to the service stairwell before the full weight of it hit him. He'd spent 2 years planning revenge, and it had all been for nothing. There was no justice coming, no courtroom, no prison sentence. Torres had made sure of that. If Vincent wanted Marcus to pay, he'd have to do it himself. And if he did it himself, Sophia would lose everything. Vincent sat on the stairs, head in his hands, and for the first time since his family died, he didn't know what to do. He'd built his entire life around this mission, sacrificed everything for it. And now the mission was gone, but the rage was still there. The grief was still there, and so was Sophia. Sophia, who had nothing to do with her father's crimes. Sophia, who was as much a prisoner in that house as Vincent felt. Sophia, who trusted him, who looked at him like he was worth something. Sophia, who would be destroyed if Vincent went after her father. Vincent thought about his sister, Gina. 14 years old, she'd never get to grow up, never get to fall in love or go to college or figure out who she was. She'd been taken from the world because Marcus Delano decided her father knew too much. And Sophia got to live, got to read books and drink tea and talk about philosophy, got to have a future. It wasn't fair, but fairness had nothing to do with it anymore, because the truth Vincent had been avoiding for weeks was now undeniable. If he killed Marcus Delano, he'd be no better than the man who killed his family. He'd be taking someone's father, someone's only family. And the person who'd suffer most was the one person in that house who'd shown him any kindness. Vincent sat in that stairwell until the sun started to rise. And when he finally stood up, he still didn't have an answer. But he knew one thing: the mission had just become impossible, because he couldn't destroy Marcus without destroying Sophia. And he couldn't walk away without betraying everything his family had died for. He was trapped. And the worst part was, he'd done it to himself. Vincent sat in that stairwell until the sun started to rise. And when he finally stood up, he still didn't have an answer. But he knew one thing: the mission had just become impossible. Because he couldn't destroy Marcus without destroying Sophia. And he couldn't walk away without betraying everything his family had died for. He was trapped. And the worst part was, he'd done it to himself. Vincent had 11 days left. 11 days before Torres would expect the final delivery of evidence that didn't matter anymore. 11 days before Marcus potentially made a move. 11 days to figure out whether he was going to finish what he started or walk away from everything. He tried to avoid Sophia, told himself distance was the only way to think clearly. But Sophia had a way of finding him. And on the 10th night, she found him in the garden long after everyone else had gone to bed. "You've been avoiding me," she said, sitting down on the stone bench beside him. Vincent didn't deny it. "I've had a lot on my mind. Want to talk about it?" she asked. He almost laughed. How could he possibly explain? How could he tell her that he was the son of people her father had murdered? That he'd come here to destroy everything she knew? That he'd lied to her from the very first conversation? "Not really," he said. Sophia was quiet for a moment. Then she said something that made his heart stop. "I think I'm falling for you." Vincent turned to look at her. She was staring at the ground, arms wrapped around herself like she was trying to hold something together. "I know I shouldn't," she continued. "I know it's complicated. You work here. My father would lose his mind. But I can't help it. You're the only person who sees me. Not Marcus Delano's daughter. Just me." She looked up, and her eyes were shining with something fragile and terrifying. "Do you feel it too?" Vincent wanted to lie, wanted to shut it down, wanted to tell her she was mistaken and walk away before this got any worse. But he couldn't, because the truth was, he did feel it. He'd been trying not to, trying to bury it under rage and mission focus and the memory of his family. But it was there, and it had been there for weeks. "Yes," he said, and the word felt like a confession. Sophia smiled, and it was the saddest, most hopeful thing Vincent had ever seen. "Then what are we going to do about it?" Vincent didn't have an answer, because what could they do? She was the daughter of the man who destroyed his life. He was living under a false identity, gathering evidence to ruin her father. There was no version of this that ended well. But Sophia was looking at him like he was the answer to a question she'd been asking her whole life. And Vincent, for all his planning and control, was just a man who hadn't felt anything real in 2 years. So he made a choice. Not the smart choice, not the safe choice, but the only choice that felt human. He kissed her. It was soft, tentative, the kind of kiss that asks permission even as it's happening. And when she kissed him back, Vincent felt something inside him break open. All the rage, all the grief, all the carefully constructed walls he'd built to survive, they crumbled. And for a brief, fragile moment, he wasn't Vincent Cross, the infiltrator. He wasn't Vincent Romano, the son seeking revenge. He was just Vincent, a man holding someone who made him feel alive. When they pulled apart, Sophia was crying, not sad tears, something else. Relief, maybe. Or hope. I don't know what happens next, she whispered. Neither do I, Vincent said, and he meant it. But as they sat there in the garden, hands intertwined, Vincent felt the weight of the impossible choice pressing down on him. In 9 days, he was supposed to deliver evidence to Torres. Evidence that didn't matter anymore, but Marcus didn't know that. In 9 days, Vincent could walk away, disappear, let Marcus Delano keep living his life, or he could stay. Try to build something real with Sophia. Pretend the past didn't exist, but the past did exist. His family was still dead. Marcus was still responsible. And Sophia, no matter how much Vincent cared about her, was still the daughter of a murderer. Later that night, Vincent lay in bed staring at the ceiling, Sophia's words echoing in his mind. I think I'm falling for you. He'd crossed a line he couldn't uncross. And tomorrow, he'd have to decide what that meant. Because love didn't erase the past. It didn't bring his family back. It didn't change what Marcus had done. But it did change everything about what Vincent could do next. If he went after Marcus now, he wouldn't just be seeking justice. He'd be betraying the woman he loved. And if he walked away, he'd be betraying his family. There was no right answer. No version of this where everyone got what they deserved. Just loss. Different shapes of it. Different costs. And Vincent had less than 9 days to decide which loss he could live with. The clock was ticking. And for the first time in 2 years, Vincent wasn't sure he wanted revenge anymore. He just wanted Sophia, and that terrified him more than anything Marcus Delano could ever do. It happened on the 8th day. Vincent woke up that morning knowing something was wrong. The house felt different, quieter, tense. He went through his morning routine, preparing breakfast, setting the table, moving through the motions like he had for the past 3 years. But his instincts were screaming. Something had shifted. He found out what at 10 a.m. when Mrs. Chen pulled him aside in the hallway. Mr. Delano wants to see you in his office, she said. Her face was unreadable, but her tone carried a warning. Now, Vincent's blood went cold. In 3 years, Marcus had never summoned him to his office. Staff didn't go to the office. The office was for business, for meetings, for the kind of conversations that ended with people disappearing. Vincent climbed the stairs, every step feeling like walking toward an execution. When he reached the door, it was already open. Marcus was sitting behind his desk, hands folded, expression calm. Too calm. Close the door, Marcus said. Vincent did. Sit down. Vincent sat. Marcus studied him for a long moment, the way a scientist might study something under a microscope. Then he slid a folder across the desk. Open it. Vincent's hands were steady as he picked up the folder, but his mind was racing. Inside were photographs. Vincent entering a building where he'd met with Torres months ago. Vincent using his burner phone. Vincent copying files from Marcus's computer. And beneath the photos, a single document. Vincent's real birth certificate. Vincent Romano, son of Tony and Linda Romano, brother of Gina Romano, all deceased. Marcus leaned back in his chair. You want to tell me who you really are, or should I start? Vincent said nothing. There was nothing to say. The lie was over. I've known for 6 months, Marcus continued, his voice eerily calm. Not from the beginning. I'll give you credit, you were careful. But Raymond told me about a kid feeding him information, and when I started looking into my staff, you were the only one who didn't quite fit. Vincent's jaw clenched. If you've known for 6 months, why am I still alive? Marcus smiled, and it was the coldest thing Vincent had ever seen. Because I wanted to see what you'd do, whether you'd actually go through with it. And because, he paused, you made my daughter happy, and that's rare enough that I was willing to wait. The words hit Vincent like a punch to the gut. She has no idea who you are, Marcus said. No idea that the man she's falling for is the son of the people I had killed. And you know what? I was going to let it play out. Let you two have your little romance. Because Sophia deserves something real, even if it's built on a lie. He leaned forward, and his expression hardened. But then you kissed her, and that changes things. Vincent's hands curled into fists. You don't get to talk about what she deserves. I'm her father, Marcus snapped. I'm the only person who's ever protected her. You're a ghost with a vendetta. And the second she finds out the truth, she'll hate you more than she could ever hate me. The door opened. Vincent turned. Sophia was standing in the doorway. Her face was pale, her eyes wide. She was holding a phone, Vincent's burner phone, the one he'd hidden in his room, the one she must have found. Is it true? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Vincent stood, his heart shattering. Sophia, is it true? She repeated, louder this time. Tears were streaming down her face. Are you Vincent Romano? He wanted to lie, wanted to find some way to explain, but there was no explanation that would undo this. Yes, he said. Sophia's face crumpled. Your family, the people my father. She couldn't finish the sentence. She looked at Marcus, then back at Vincent, and the betrayal in her eyes was unbearable. You came here to kill him, she said. It wasn't a question. I came here for justice, Vincent said. Justice? Sophia's voice cracked. You lied to me. You let me trust you. You let me fall for you. And the whole time, you were just using me to get to him. That's not, Vincent started, but she cut him off. Don't you dare tell me it wasn't like that. She turned to her father, and her voice broke completely. Did you kill his family? Marcus didn't answer, and his silence was answer enough. Sophia staggered back like she'd been hit. Oh my God. Sophia, Marcus said, standing. It was business. It was business? She screamed. You killed a 14-year-old girl because of business? The room fell silent. Marcus's face went hard. You don't understand how this world works. No, Sophia said, her voice shaking. I understand perfectly. You're a monster, and I've spent my whole life pretending you weren't. She looked at Vincent, and the pain in her eyes was devastating. But you're just like him. You came here to destroy him, and you didn't care who else you destroyed in the process. I care about you, Vincent said, stepping toward her. Don't, she said, holding up a hand. Don't come near me. Don't talk to me. Don't. Her voice broke, and she turned and ran. Vincent moved to follow, but Marcus stepped in front of him. You're done here, Marcus said quietly. If I ever see you again, I'll finish what I should have finished 6 months ago. Vincent stared at him. At the man who'd taken everything from him, the man he'd spent 2 years planning to destroy. And he realized something that made the rage feel hollow. Killing Marcus wouldn't bring his family back. It wouldn't undo the lie. It wouldn't fix what he'd done to Sophia. It would just be more loss, more destruction, more people broken by the cycle of revenge. Vincent turned and walked out of the office, out of the mansion, out of the life he'd built on a lie. And as he walked through the gates for the last time, he heard Sophia's voice in his mind. You're just like him. She was right. And that was the worst part. 3 months later, Marcus Delano was arrested. Not because of Vincent, not because of Torres, who disappeared the moment the investigation went public, but because one of Marcus's own lieutenants turned state's evidence in exchange for a reduced sentence. The empire collapsed in a matter of weeks. Assets frozen, properties seized, associates scattering like rats from a sinking ship. Marcus Delano, the man who'd believed he was untouchable, was sentenced to 30 years in federal prison. Vincent watched the news from a cheap motel in Nevada. He'd left the city the day Sophia found out the truth. Didn't look back, didn't try to contact her. What would he even say? He destroyed her life as thoroughly as her father had destroyed his. The only difference was, Vincent had done it while pretending to care. He thought about her constantly, wondered where she'd gone, whether she'd stayed in the city or disappeared the way he had, whether she thought about him at all, or if she'd erased him completely. He hoped she hated him. It would be easier that way. Vincent tried to move on. got a job at a construction site under a new name, kept his head down, didn't talk to anyone. But the grief followed him, not just for his family anymore, for Sophia. For the version of himself that had felt human for a brief, fragile moment before it all fell apart. Some nights, he'd lie awake and replay the last time he saw her. The look in her eyes when she realized everything had been a lie. The way her voice had broken when she said, "You're just like him." She was wrong. Or maybe she was right. Vincent didn't know anymore. He'd come for revenge and ended up destroying the one person who'd made him feel like life was worth living. 6 months after Marcus's arrest, Vincent received a letter. No return address, just his name on the envelope. Inside was a single piece of paper, Sophia's handwriting. It said, "I don't forgive you, but I understand why you did it. My father took your family. You took mine. I guess that makes us even. I hope you find peace. I don't think I ever will." Vincent read the letter a dozen times. Then he burned it. Not because he wanted to forget, but because carrying it felt like holding on to something he didn't deserve. Sophia had lost everything because of him. Her father, her home, her sense of safety. And he'd lost her. Maybe that was justice. Not the kind he'd planned for. Not the kind that felt satisfying or right, but the kind that left everyone broken. The kind where nobody won. Vincent never tried to find her, never reached out. He carried her with him the way he carried his family, as a reminder of the cost of revenge. As proof that some things, once broken, can never be repaired. And every time he thought about going back, about trying to explain or apologize or make it right, he remembered her words. "I don't think I ever will. Peace." She'd wished him peace. But peace wasn't something Vincent Romano would ever have, because the truth was, he'd become exactly what he'd set out to destroy. A man willing to sacrifice everything and everyone for a mission that didn't fix anything. Marcus Delano was in prison. Vincent's family was still dead. Sophia was still broken. And the only thing Vincent had accomplished was proving that revenge doesn't heal. It just creates more wreckage, more ghosts, more people wandering through life carrying weight they'll never put down. 2 years later, Vincent received one more letter. No words, just a photograph. Sophia, standing in front of a small bookstore she'd opened, and on the back, in her handwriting, "I'm trying." It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't reconciliation. But it was proof that some wounds, even if they never fully heal, don't have to be fatal. Maybe that's the closest thing to peace either of them would ever get. There's a question people ask when they hear stories like this. Was it worth it? Did Vincent get justice? Did Marcus get what he deserved? And the answer is, it depends on what you think justice means. Marcus Delano spent the rest of his life in prison. Vincent's family was avenged, at least on paper. But Vincent lost the woman he loved. Sophia lost her father, and the only version of reality she'd ever known. And the cycle of pain that started with one man's greed rippled outward, touching everyone in its path. So, was it worth it? Vincent doesn't know. Some days, he tells himself his family would be proud, that he did what needed to be done. Other days, he wonders if his father would have wanted this. If Tony Romano, a quiet accountant who kept his head down and just wanted to provide for his family, would have wanted his son to spend years consumed by rage, would have wanted him to sacrifice love for vengeance. Vincent will never know, and that's the weight he carries. The truth about revenge is this. It doesn't undo the harm. It doesn't bring people back. It doesn't heal the wound. It just creates a new wound, a different kind of pain. And sometimes, the person you hurt most is yourself. Vincent learned that the hard way. So here's the question for you. If you were in Vincent's position, if someone took everything from you and you had the chance to make them pay, what would you do? Would you choose revenge, knowing it might cost you the only chance at happiness you'd ever have? Or would you walk away and let the past stay buried, even if it meant living with the injustice forever? There's no right answer, just choices and consequences, and the quiet, unshakable knowledge that some scars never fade. Vincent Romano walked into an enemy's house with murder in his heart. He walked out with a scar that will never heal. And somewhere in the wreckage of two broken families, the question remains, was it justice or just more loss? Maybe they're the same thing. Maybe that's the point. What do you think? Let us know in the comments. And if this story made you feel something, subscribe so you never miss another one. Because stories like this, they stay with you, whether you want them to or not.